She kissed him. Right there. At his own wedding. In front of his bride. In front of 200 guests. In front of bodyguards whose hands were already reaching. The music stopped cold. Champagne glasses froze midair. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. And then every single eye in that hall turned to the bride. Just think about that for a moment. You gave that man years. You loved him through the hard nights, the dangerous silence, the moments nobody else would stay for. You stood beside a man the whole world feared, and on your wedding day, a stranger walks straight up and kisses him. What would you do? Be honest. Most people would lose it. Most people would scream, cry, throw something. Most people would give that room exactly what it came for, a breakdown they'd talk about for years. But Zara didn't move. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She just watched. Because what those guests didn't know, what even the most powerful people in that room had missed completely, was that this moment had been planned. Not by the waitress. Not by the groom. By Zara herself. She had known it was coming. She had helped design it. And while 200 people waited for her to fall apart, she was the only one in the room who understood exactly what was happening. Stay with me. Because this story isn't about a kiss. It's about loyalty so deep, most people will never experience it. And by the time we reach the end, you will never look at trust the same way again. Before we go any further, drop a comment right now. If someone kissed your partner at your wedding, what's your first move? Tell me below. And if you're new here, subscribe. We bring you powerful stories like this every single week. To understand what happened at that wedding, you have to go back. Way back. To a city that ate the weak alive and put the ruthless on thrones. His name was Selim Reyes. You wouldn't find that name in any newspaper. No charity events. No magazine covers. But say it in the wrong room, in the right city, and every conversation died instantly. Selim built his empire from nothing. No inheritance. No shortcuts. Every alliance, every territory, every ounce of power was earned through sacrifice and sharp thinking. At 34, he was broad, calm, and quietly terrifying. He never raised his voice. He never needed to. But that kind of power always has a cost. He had learned betrayal before he learned loyalty. Men he called brothers had sold him out for pocket change. He had survived 3 attempts on his life before his 30th birthday. By the time most men were settling down, Selim had already lost more than most people ever risk. He was not a man who trusted easily. Which made Zara say something he couldn't quite explain. Zara was a corporate attorney, focused, unshakable, and completely immune to intimidation. The day they met, she was the only person in a room full of powerful men who spoke to Selim like he was a human being. Not a legend. Not a threat. Just a man. She didn't flirt. She didn't position herself. She simply talked to him, directly, honestly, without fear. And for a man who had spent his whole life being feared rather than known, that hit differently. Their bond grew quietly. Deep and steady, like water carving through rock. She asked him for one thing only. Never lie to me, she said. Not once. Because I will never come back from it. He never did. The wedding took 18 months to plan. Not because they needed that long, but because Selim refused to rush it. No flashy show of money. No performance for other people. He wanted something that actually felt like them, real, private, and built to last. The venue was a restored estate on the edge of the city. Candlelit archways. White marble floors. Deep burgundy and gold draped across every wall. It looked like something out of another era, powerful and quietly beautiful. 200 guests. Every single one chosen personally. No press. No cameras. No social media. Every guest had signed a confidentiality agreement before receiving their invitation. Security swept the building 3 separate times before the first guest arrived. Selim trusted almost no one. But that evening, for the first time in years, he believed the circle around him was clean. Zara was stunning. Deep ivory gown with gold embroidery along the neckline. Her natural hair pinned up, small diamonds catching the candlelight every time she turned her head. She walked down that aisle alone, no one beside her, no one giving her away. She had nobody to do that. She grew up in a small house with a grandmother who had more faith than furniture. Everything Zara had, she built herself, piece by piece, year by year. Some guests watched her with warmth. Others watched her the way certain people always watch someone who doesn't fit their idea of who should be in the room. The whispers moved through the crowd like smoke. What exactly does he see in her? Give it a year. 2 at most. She's beautiful, but this world will swallow her whole. Zara didn't flinch. If she heard any of it, she let it pass straight through her. Her eyes stayed on one person's Selim, standing at the altar, still and unreadable to everyone in that room except her. She saw what nobody else could. The slight drop in his shoulders when she reached him. The breath he finally let go. The ceremony was short and honest. No borrowed words. No rehearsed speeches. They had written their own vows and kept them private, spoken quietly, just between the two of them, so soft that even the officiant leaned in and still barely caught them. When it ended, the room erupted. The reception began. Music filled every corner. Champagne flowed freely. Laughter spread across faces that had been stiff and formal all evening. The tension of ceremony gave way to celebration. And that is exactly when it started. Small things. Easy to miss if you weren't looking for them. A guest near the back entrance who had been standing in the same spot for 20 minutes, glass in hand, never drinking. A server near the east corridor who made eye contact with someone across the room. Not casual eye contact. Deliberate. Confirming. 2 men near the main door shifted their positions at the exact same moment. Not one guest noticed. But one person did. Her name was Mireille Dax. For 2 full hours, she had moved through that reception like furniture. Slim, quiet, dark hair tucked under a server's cap, tray in one hand, eyes always down. She refilled glasses. She cleared plates. She smiled politely when guests spoke to her and vanished the moment they looked away. Nobody noticed her. That was the point. Mireille had worked inside Selim's protective network for 6 years. No official title. No public record. She didn't exist on paper, not in any system that mattered. Even within his own organization, only 4 people knew what she actually did. She communicated through layered codes that would take most people weeks to even recognize as codes at all. She was a ghost. Completely by design. But tonight, she had seen something. The man near the back who wasn't drinking. The deliberate eye contact across the corridor. The 2 men at the main entrance moving together like they had rehearsed it. Separately, each thing looked like nothing. Together, they formed a picture that made her blood run cold. This was not random. This was coordinated. Someone had spent time getting people inside this building, positioning them carefully, and waiting for the right moment. When the groom was relaxed, surrounded by civilians, guard lowered, champagne in hand. There was a protocol for exactly this. Years ago, Selim had established a set of emergency signals, ways to communicate a threat without triggering panic, without alerting the enemy, without turning a controlled situation into chaos. Each signal meant something different. Each one had a specific response attached to it. The highest level signal, the one reserved for imminent, critical danger, was a kiss. Not affection. Not emotion. Pure information. A brief contact on the cheek that shifted to the lips if the threat level was beyond urgent. This was beyond urgent. Mireille set her tray down on the nearest table. She straightened her jacket. She walked across that marble floor slowly, calmly, like someone who belonged exactly where she was going. And she kissed Selim Reyes at his own wedding reception. The room exploded. A woman near the front let out a sharp shriek. Someone dropped a glass and it shattered against the marble. The crowd surged inward, not to help, not to intervene, but to watch. That ugly, irresistible human pull toward someone else's disaster. Who is that woman? Does Zara even know her? I knew it. Men like him never change. Near the back, a woman laughed. Loud and deliberate. The kind of laugh designed to be heard. And now every single person in that hall forgot about the kiss entirely. Because the real show, the one they had been quietly waiting for all evening, was about to begin. The beautiful bride from nowhere. The woman who had no business being in this world. The one they had whispered about and measured and doubted from the moment she walked in. She was about to break. They were sure of it. They leaned in closer. They were ready to watch. Selim didn't panic. He didn't push Mireille away in disgust. He didn't spin around to check his wife's reaction. He didn't perform shock for the crowd the way a guilty man would. He simply looked at Mireille. 1 second. 2. Then he stepped back quietly and said 2 words. Thank you. The room went completely still. Not the hell-breath stillness of before. This was different. This was confusion so deep it had no sound. Thank you? People looked at each other. Mouths slightly open. Eyes searching for someone else who could explain what they had just heard. The story they had all agreed on, the scandal, the betrayal, the humiliation, had just collapsed in real time, and nobody knew what to replace it with. Then Zara moved. The crowd parted without thinking. Nobody blocked her. Nobody spoke. The only sound in that entire hall was her heels against the marble floor. Click, click, click. Slow, deliberate. Every step placed with complete intention. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't shaking. She walked like a woman who knew exactly where she was going and had already decided what she would do when she got there. 200 people watched her cross that floor. Some were certain she was about to slap someone. Others thought she would finally break, that the composure would crack right here, right now, in front of everyone who had doubted her. The ones who had whispered behind their champagne glasses leaned forward. This was the moment they had been quietly anticipating all evening. Zara stopped in front of Mireille. She looked at her. Really looked, not with anger, not with suspicion, but with the steady gaze of someone who already knew the whole story. The silence stretched. Then Zara opened her arms and pulled Mireille into a full embrace. Not a polite hug. Not a performance. She held her genuinely, firmly, the way you hold someone you are grateful for. The silence didn't just break. It shattered. Gasps moved through the crowd like electricity. The woman near the back who had laughed so loudly moments ago now stood with her glass frozen halfway to her mouth. The men who had been smirking exchanged uncertain glances. The whispers that had been so confident all evening suddenly had nothing left to say. Because the scene in front of them made no sense inside the story they had constructed. The betrayed bride was hugging the woman who kissed her husband. And she was smiling. Not the fragile smile of someone holding themselves together with everything they had. Not the tight, polished smile of a woman performing dignity under pressure. A real smile. Warm and completely unbothered. Like she had been waiting for this moment. Like she had always known it would come. The crowd had come ready to watch Zara fall apart. Instead, they watched her stand taller than anyone in the room. Stop right here for a second. What Zara just did, that is not weakness. That is not a woman in denial. That is someone operating from a level of trust that most people spend their whole lives chasing and never find. Comment below, did you see this coming? Rate this story right now, 1 to 10. Be honest. And do not go anywhere, because the best part of this story hasn't even happened yet. The hug lasted only a few seconds. When Zara stepped back, she turned and faced the room. All 200 people who had shown up to celebrate and who had, for one sharp moment, turned into an audience waiting for someone to bleed. She smiled at them. Not forced. Not fragile. Not the careful expression of a woman managing her emotions in public. Just real. Please enjoy your evening, she said, her voice steady and clear across the entire hall. Nothing has ended here. Everything is fine. Then Selim stepped forward. His hand rested gently at the small of Zara's back, a quiet, deliberate gesture. A signal of its own. Then he looked out at the crowd with the same calm authority that had made far more dangerous men than these fall completely silent. What you just witnessed was not a betrayal, he said. I want to introduce someone to you. He gestured toward Mireille, who stood still, trained stillness, the kind that comes from years of being invisible on purpose. But she wasn't hiding anymore. 6 years ago, Selim continued, I was set up from the inside. People I had trusted completely handed me over to my enemies. I walked into a building I should never have entered. No communication. No exit. I had maybe 20 minutes before it was over. He paused and let that land. Mireille was the only reason I walked out alive. You could hear the candles in that silence. She has been working in the background ever since, protecting me and protecting us from threats that never made it to the surface. Tonight, she spotted something that would have turned this celebration into a nightmare. She used a signal we established years ago. I recognized it immediately. I responded to it. He looked directly at Mireille then. Not as an employer acknowledging staff. As one loyal person recognizing another. Tonight, you don't stand in the shadows anymore. And while Selim was speaking those words to the room, his men were already finishing the work. No announcements. No drama. The guest near the back entrance, who had stood in the same spot for 20 minutes without touching his drink, escorted out through a side door so smoothly that the couple beside him never looked up from their conversation. The two men at the main entrance, who had shifted positions together, flanked from both sides before they could take a single step. The server, who had made deliberate eye contact across the corridor, met quietly by two of Selim's most trusted people before he reached the hallway. No raised voices. No chaos. No broken glass. No blood on that white marble floor. 8 minutes after the kiss, every threat in the building had been removed. The guests near the exits saw nothing unusual. The guests at the center of the room saw only a husband honoring the woman who had once saved his life. That was always the design. Every single part of it. What broke the spell wasn't shouting. It wasn't a dramatic speech or a public confrontation or someone storming out through the main doors. It was something much quieter than that. It was understanding. One by one, like lights switching on in a dark building, the people in that room began to see what had actually happened. Not the story they had rushed to write in their heads, the scandal, the cheating, the humiliation, but the real story. The one that had been playing out right in front of them the whole time. And it hit differently when it landed. The woman who had whispered, "I knew this would happen," stopped talking mid-sentence. Her mouth closed slowly. She looked down at her champagne and didn't look back up for a long time. The man who had laughed, that loud, cruel laugh designed to be heard, was now staring at the floor like it had suddenly become very interesting. The guests who had leaned in to watch Zara crumble were now watching something else entirely. They were watching a woman stand in the middle of a room that had tried to swallow her whole, hand in her husband's hand, shoulders back, completely unbroken. Not performing strength. Just having it. The ones who had whispered about whether she belonged here, whether she was built for this world, whether a man like Selim would ever truly choose a woman like her, they had their answer now. Not in words. Not in a speech. In the way she stood. In the way he never let go of her hand. Zara looked at Selim, just looked at him, the way two people look at each other when they have survived something together and came out the other side, still whole. Then she tilted her head slightly and said, loud enough for the people nearest them to hear, "Shall we dance?" Something shifted in Selim's face. The stillness that made people nervous, the unreadable calm he wore like armor, it cracked open just slightly. And what came through was a laugh. A real one. Not polite. Not controlled. The kind of laugh that comes from somewhere deep and honest, the kind that people who had known Selim for years said they had seen maybe twice in their lives. "Yes," he said. "We shall." The band began to play. They moved to the center of the floor and the crowd pulled back naturally, instinctively, not out of obligation, but out of something closer to respect. What they watched was not two people recovering from a scandal. It was two people showing everyone in that room, quietly, undeniably, without a single unnecessary word, exactly who they were to each other. Unshakable. The evening had tried to break them. Instead, it had only made what they had more visible, more permanent, more real. The first dance ended to genuine applause. Not the polite, rhythmic clapping of people fulfilling a social obligation. Something warmer than that. Something that had earned its way into the room after everything the evening had put everyone through. When the music slowed and the floor began to fill with other couples, Selim did something no one expected. He left Zara's side for exactly 2 minutes. He walked to where Mireille was standing near the edge of the room, back in her quiet corner, instinctively returning to the margins the way she had been trained to do, and he handed her a glass of champagne. Not through a staff member. Not with a nod from across the room. Personally. Directly. Man to woman. He didn't make a speech. He didn't wave people over to watch. He just stood in front of her, held out the glass, and said, quietly enough that only she and Zara, who had followed a step behind, could hear. No more shadows. You've earned your seat at the table. Mireille looked at the glass. For someone who had spent 6 years being invisible on purpose, who had built her entire value around being unnoticed, unremembered, unnamed, being seen this directly was almost difficult to absorb. She took the glass slowly. Then she looked at Zara. You knew, she said. The whole time you knew about me. It wasn't a question. She had already worked it out. Zara nodded simply. He told me about you before he ever said he loved me, she said. He told me there was a woman who had walked into a burning situation to pull him out when everyone else had already run. He didn't tell me your name, but he told me what you did. She paused. That's actually the moment I decided he was worth trusting. Mireille was quiet for a moment. Then she said, You're not what I expected. Zara smiled. Neither are you. What happened in that small, quiet exchange, 3 people standing at the edge of a reception while music played and guests danced nearby, carried more weight than anything else that had happened that evening. More than the kiss. More than the revelation. More than the applause. Because it was completely real. No audience. No performance. No angle. Just 3 people who had, in different ways and at different costs, chosen loyalty over convenience. And were now standing together on the other side of it. The reception ran well past midnight. People who had arrived full of judgment left full of something harder to name. Not every guest could explain exactly what had shifted, but almost all of them felt it. Something in the air of that hall had changed after the truth came out. The heaviness lifted. What replaced it was rare at events like these. Warmth. Honesty. The specific feeling of having witnessed something that was completely, undeniably real. There is a version of this story where Zara breaks. Where she becomes exactly what those guests expected, a cautionary tale. A woman who flew too close to a world that wasn't built for her and paid the price publicly, painfully, permanently. That version never happened. Because Zara made a choice most people are too afraid to make. She chose to trust completely. Not blindly, but fully. With both eyes open, full knowledge, and the quiet strength of a woman who knew exactly who she was before anyone could tell her otherwise. She understood that real love isn't the absence of hard moments. It's choosing to walk through those moments together, honestly, without flinching. She understood that the people who protect you don't always stand beside you in the light. Some of them work in the dark. Silently. At great cost. And they deserve to be honored, not forgotten. Most of all, she understood this. The most powerful person in any room is not the loudest, the richest, or the most feared. It is the person who knows who they are and refuses to become anything less. The ones who waited for you to fall will spend a long time watching you rise. And that is the story of the kiss that looked like betrayal, but was actually the purest act of loyalty in that entire room. Now I want to hear from you. Which character stayed with you the most? Was it Mireille, who gave up 6 years of her life working in silence to protect people she believed in? Was it Selim, who honored her publicly at the moment it mattered most? Or was it Zara, the woman who walked straight into the fire and came out standing taller than everyone who doubted her? Tell me in the comments. Tell me your rating 1 to 10, be honest. Tell me what the story made you feel. If it moved you, share it. Someone in your life needs to hear this today. Someone who is being underestimated. Someone who is holding on. Someone who needs to be reminded that loyalty is still real. Subscribe if you haven't, because every week, we bring you stories exactly like this one. Built to stay with you long after the screen goes dark. Until next time, trust carefully. Love honestly. And never perform your pain for people who were never cheering for you. See you in the next one.